Hello folks, I hope that you're having just a great day today and keeping yourself safe in our COVID crisis. Today is the next chapter of my Living with Huntington's Disease, which is my Living with HD chapter. Today what I want to do is take a deep dive into specifically interview questions that are asked of you, and there's one question that's asked of you a lot that's biased against people that have a disability like HD, and a lot of people who ask interviews ask this question, and I think they should be asking a different question. So I want to go over it, why it enters illegal area, and what it's super common, and I'll do an unpacking for you about what the sort of the questions look like. And I'm somebody who's been trained in questions. My master's degree includes personnel, what's legal, what's not legal, and that sort of thing. So I want to unpack that for you today. But before we get started, as a reminder, or for those of you who are new, Huntington's disease is a neurological degenerative condition that is unable to be solved as of right now. You get it, and you inherited it from one of your parents, or both your parents perhaps. You have a chance of having it affect your mental capacities, so your mental facility will drop over time. Your IQ, how fast you are, that sort of thing will drop over time. You will also begin to have physical manifestations. You'll twitch, you'll have a chorea, you'll shake, you'll be less and less agile over time, and then it also attacks your mental health, your personality, your mood, and so forth. So it attacks three separate aspects of you. I'm 7 years into a condition that the average person has for 20 years. So there you are. That's just a reminder of what Huntington's disease is. Now, I have done a lot of job searching during my time in higher ed. So higher ed has, in each higher ed institution, colleges, universities, that sort of thing, they actually have a personnel office on campus that I can report issues to. So there are a number of things that you are not allowed to ask in an interview. You can ask pretty much anything you want to as long as it applies to the job, but there are a few things that are verboten. And the idea is that they introduce bias into the process, and you want to keep the hiring process as unbiased as possible. Here, I'll give you just a quick example. You are not allowed to ask in an interview setting what a candidate's religion is. It's not pertinent to the job. The only exception would be if it's at a religious institution. Like, for example, if that person was coming in to be a secretary at a church. Well, obviously, if you're working at the church, then it's cogent to the job, right? You want to hire somebody who actually is a practicing member of the faith, right? So those are the kind of the exceptions built into it. But otherwise, it's not pertinent to the job. If you were to ask somebody their religion and find out that they're Jewish, and then you didn't hire them, then they would have a claim that the reason why you didn't hire them was because they were Jewish, which doesn't apply to their job, but they would have a claim that they could file with your personnel office, which could or even sue you. Similarly, another, although suits probably would not do much, but the claims to the personnel office could. They would force you to have to hire him anyway for the job, or pay them a salary while they're searching for another job or something like that, right? They would have you have some sort of compensation. And in addition to the legal ramifications of asking questions, it's also just not something you should do, because it's not pertinent to the job, right? So it's wrong to do. So there's also that sort of moral aspect to it. Now, if they volunteer their religion, then that's fine. That's on the candidate. So, for example, if I were to ask the question, what shifts per week, what times per week would you be unable to work? If they were to volunteer that the only time that they can't work is on Saturday, which is the Sabbath, when they have synagogue, then they volunteered that they're a Jew as a part of that conversation, that you didn't ask them if they were a Jew. That's fine. Once they volunteered it and put it up on the table, that's fine. But you can't ask the question. Similarly, if they were to say, I can't come on Sunday morning because I got to go to church, but otherwise I can do any shift during a week. What shifts can you work during a week is a legitimate question to ask. What's your work schedule look like? That is a cogent question. And they might volunteer something, but it's not specifically right. They could say, I can work any day but Saturday, without telling you that they're a Jew, right? That's fine. So it doesn't put them into a corner. And there are a number of these questions that you can ask. You can't ask somebody where they're from. Because if they say, well, I'm from Mexico, then you've introduced a bias into the conversation, right? You can't ask somebody if they're gay or not, if they're married or not, if they have children or not, right? If they're pregnant, if they're planning on having children, right? These sorts of things. You're not allowed to ask these questions as a part of the interview. Whether or not they're disabled. You can ask if they are physically able to do the job, but you can't ask if they have a disability. All right, so that's why I'm coming to the key question now. This question is asked incredibly commonly, so I want to unpack it for you. It's one of the most common questions you're going to get asked in a job interview. It has, and that question is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Sometimes the alternative of that will be, where do you see yourself in 10 years, or where do you see yourself in 20 years? And the idea behind this question is that it wants to see your ambition, right? It's looking for somebody who wants to do more than this job, looking for somebody who wants to push themselves, looking for somebody, right, and that sort of thing. It's a very, very common question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? The problem is that it has this baseline assumption, and that baseline assumption is that I have we'll be working then after that span of time. So let's say, let's say I'm interviewing for a job and you ask me the 10 years question. I'm 43. I don't expect to be working when I'm 53. I expect by that time I've been forced to retire by Huntington's disease. So here are the three answers that I can give you. The first answer I can give you is a lie. I can pretend like I don't have the disease, and I can lie, and I could say, well, I see myself as a director of residence life in 10 years after I have taken this job, or I see myself as a dean of students in 10 years before I retire. I don't. Those are lies, but they answer the question that's asked. The second is that I could hem and haw and give an answer like, well, where do any of us see ourselves? Plans go astray so much. I still see myself working in higher ed, to like a generic answer that doesn't answer the question and that I caused myself to lose points on. And then the third answer I can give is the one where I have to tell them, well, I got Huntington's disease. I don't see myself working in 10 years. And I have to explain what Huntington's disease is. So I have to either voluntarily give up information or lie, or give a half answer that's not a real answer at all. And then I lose points from the interview because of it. Three separate issues. Three separate answers that I can give. None of those are appropriate. You shouldn't be forced to, a question should not force you to lie, to give a no answer, or to give, to volunteer information that you're not allowed to ask otherwise. And it's not just Huntington's disease. There are other conditions that somebody might have that would preclude them from working after the period of time that's mentioned. There are also other things that people might have. For example, let's say that I've just gotten married and I plan to be a housewife in 5 years or 10 years. I plan to be pregnant and have kids. Again, I would be forced into the three answers. The answer of, well, of lying and saying, in 5 years, I see myself, moving up in this field to the next level. Or in 5 years, I see myself, who knows where any of us are going to see ourselves, we're all flexible, and the half answer, or the, hey, I'm planning on getting pregnant and probably not even working, which again is going to be held against you by a hiring officer and introduces bias into the process. So somebody who just got pregnant, who's not expecting to work because they're a housewife, also somebody who's older who might be retired in 5 or 10 years. If they're 65, if they're 62, and the question on the interview sheet is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Their answer is going to be, I'm not working in 5, or what are they going to say? They expect to be retired in that. Or what if they're expecting an early retirement package? Or that's what they have from another job. So the idea, this question assumes that you're still going to be working in 5, 10, 20, whatever the period of time is. And it's not the case with a lot of candidates. So that's the problem, is it introduces bias into the process or forces you to an uncomfortable answer, one or the other, or a lot. Therefore, I don't think it's an appropriate question. You can ask questions that get to the ambitiousness of a candidate, what they expect to do with the position, that sort of thing, without asking this question. There are better ways at getting at it, rather than this question that assumes that they're still going to be working and be able-bodied, or still going to be willing to work in 5 or 10 years' time when you've asked the question. So there you are. That's a question that's always gotten my goat. and so forth. And I think it's hurt me to get hired because I haven't lied, so I've typically given the half answer and so forth. And I just don't feel that that's an appropriate answer to give. So anyway, there you are. I'll leave you to it. Have you ever been asked that question in an interview? Have you ever asked that question in an interview and see some of the issues that can pop up from it? As a result, I'd recommend doing something else. What do you think about the point that I made? Is there anything in there that resonated with you? Just let me know. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. We all have such busy things happening in our lives, so the fact that you spent this time with me is very humbling. And if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. There's so many more of these to come. I try to do a weekly video on Huntington's disease on Saturdays. My next two are going to be a video on what it's like to be sleepless with Huntington's disease, and then also about driving with Huntington's disease. How do you not drive in a world that's built around driving? So those are going to be my next two videos for you. And once again, thanks for your time. You have a great day.